let's say you're asking questions about regenerative culture and you understand culture, right? You're a business leader and you understand the importance of culture. So odds are you've seen people get burned out, right? And so it's probably going to be, you're probably not going to know a lot about it, but it's probably going to be intriguing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So I think, yeah. So I'm familiar with the term sustainability, right? I think that's
Yes,
probably what I would first go to. You don't want people to be burned out. You want to be successful and you want to be able to replicate the success through time.
right.
So why would I choose regenerative over sustainable or over successful? What is the distinguishing characteristic? What makes regenerative better?
Sustainable means status quo to a very, it means I can continue to perform at this level into the future. A lot of times what it takes to be sustainable, if you think about agriculture, right? What it takes to be sustainable in agriculture is to constantly pump more and more fertilizers, more and more nutrients into a ground that has been depleted. Sustainable business can look very much like that. I'm going to pay people more so they'll keep working at this level. I'm going to come up with motivational programs so I can keep people working. So what that is, it's almost artificial or inorganic ways of keeping things moving forward. And what that tends to do is just sustainable means you burn out more slowly, right? We're finding artificial ways to slow the burnout rate where regenerative is something that um, Jim Collins would call this the flywheel effect, right? Regenerative is something that's actually gaining in energy, gaining time. In agriculture, if you're being regenerative, your soil, your livestock get healthier and better every season. Every season, you're actually producing more with less, not less with more. Sustainability can very much be less with more. And
So
regenerative,
regenerative means the processes themselves, the work itself is actually what's building the soil in agriculture or building the culture. You don't have to always be looking for an outside source or an outside resource to pump it up. The work itself is what's building your culture and building not the sustainability, obviously, but building your success, building your longevity.
so can you see yourself as first off an employee in what we've just described in a sustainable, with somebody who's working to be sustainable in their culture, or someone who has actually achieved a regenerative culture? Well, how would that feel different to you? What would it look like?
I think you wouldn't go home at the end of the day just so tired. I mean, there's different kinds of tired, right? There's physical work. You're tired from a good workout, and that's a good tired, right? But you're mentally drained is usually what people describe feeling when they leave the non-regenerative place.
Yeah.
You have to do something else to recharge. You have to do something else to heal human again.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a study done many years ago where they were evaluating culture, and one of the points they evaluated was, do we have people involved in decision making? And an attempt at sustainable culture, they would ask people their opinion and get their feedback when they made decisions and have them and make sure they involved them in the decision making process. There were others who had what I would have a regenerative culture who did very close to the same things. The difference really was motivation. In sustainable, it's I want to do this to get more out of these people because they're a valuable resource. In the regenerative culture, it's their opinion matters. I don't think I'd make the best decisions without their insight, without their input, without they're on the ground seeing things I just don't see. So there's a value difference in those. And in that first, the attempted sustainable, when they interviewed the employees about their culture, they said, and they were asked, are you involved in decision making? They said, yes, we're asked questions because our managers want us to think that our opinions matter. but we kind of know that they don't. And then in the what we call regenerative culture, people said, absolutely, our bosses respect our opinions, our leaders care, and they know that we're seeing things they don't see. And so they consult with us to get data for decision making that helps them lead us more effectively, or something along those lines. So you can look like you're doing the same things, but the difference is how you value the people, how you value the resources that you're working with, and your opinion on whether or not, is it if you look at our charts, there's going to be a scale between, on one end, a relationship can be, I can say I value people, so I manipulate them to get them where I want to be, or I can say I value people, so I help them to build the company and they help me to build the company. We're in this together. It's a we economy, not a me economy, right? Or a me culture.
Regenerative isn't just about the programs and the things and the processes. It really starts with the people. Well, you talk a lot about character.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with the character of the leaders, because if you don't have the right character and the right principles, everything else is just motions and people see right through it.
Exactly. Another way to look at that, let's say that you're a manager and you're doing a performance improvement plan. We call it a PIP, right? So you have to do you have someone who's messing up in some way or another, and you're trying to help manage them, to help them to deal with the situation, right? And the reason I edited myself when I started to say help them, that might be the dividing point. For instance, it sometimes it's the difference between being a manager and a leader. If I'm a good manager and I have someone who's uh, struggling to succeed at the job, right? Maybe failing even. I'm going to go through the steps of progressive discipline. And the back of my mind, one of my main drivers is I need to do this well so that I can mitigate exposure to legal liability, right? I'm going to do this well so that if I get sued, all of this can go to court and I'm going to be okay. I did my job in a way that protected the company. A leader would do the same things because he's going to have to be a good manager, but he's going to have to be a good manager plus be a good leader, or she. And what she'll do is use that same process to say, how can I help this person successfully engage of the mission in the mission of the company in a way that helps them grow? And how can I help them contribute value in a way that helps us all be successful together, right? I do this as a leader to help someone grow and to help them be successful. That's my main. Now, I'll do it in a way that doesn't expose me to liability, because that's the minimum threshold, not the maximum
Mhm.
threshold. The real threshold for me as a leader is, how do I help this person engage in the mission of the company in a way that creates mutual benefit?
Okay. So if you were a leader of a company and you know that something's wrong and something's missing, and you don't know the words regenerative, how would you ask for help?
What a great question. You know what I've heard people say in the coaching process? You help us to be the leaders that we always wanted to become. So a lot of times people manage, and I want to be really careful about this word, manage. A lot of times in the leadership lexicon, we've been hearing for over a decade now, things like you manage things, you lead people. And it comes across as though management is bad and leadership is good. They both have a really important role in creating a healthy culture, even a regenerative culture. It's just that at the senior levels, you better be both. You can't just manage anymore. You have to lead. So back to your question, if I were struggling as a leader and I didn't know the word regenerative culture, what would I be seeing? Um, what I'd be seeing is probably deja vu dialogue, right? I'd be having the same conversations over and over without any different results. I'd probably be running through people. I'd be seeing turnover in my employees. I would not be building healthy relationships with my customers or my clients. They might be a little dissatisfied because I can't consistently meet their expectations. I'm probably losing sleep at night. So I am getting burned out, and you see things, people getting burned out around me. Almost everyone knows what burnout is, right? They've experienced it, they've seen it, they've watched others do it. And almost everyone, if they've been in business at all, understands there's an astronomical cost to burnout. So you might not know the word regenerative, but regenerative is the antithesis of burnout, right?
Yeah.
As in agriculture, I can do the same things over and over again, but I'm progressively burning out my soil. The nutritions are being leached out of it, and then I'm having to artificially put nutrition back in to make my next year's crop. Whereas opposed to regeneratively, I do my agriculture in a way that every year the very the very product itself regenerates the soil, whether
Yeah.
it's cattle, sheep, goats, or even organic planting, which I'm less familiar with than I am the ranching side of things. Is that helpful so far?
Is. I think one of the ways that I've best recognized what regenerative means is that it's applicable to other situations. One of my first coaching clients was a daughter who worked for her dad, which was, fun. It's familiar. And coached her for a year and we talked a lot. And without venturing into roles where I'm not qualified, right? I'm not a therapist. It talked a lot about her relationship with her dad, who happened to be her boss, right? And she didn't even stay with the company. She got married like a year later and left. But at the end, what she said was, I have the best relationship with my dad now that I had ever had. She was nearly 30, and they'd had this company business for a long time. And I thought, she didn't even stay with the company, but that was kind of a very big moment for me. Was that's really cool. That's how we know that it's real and that it matters and that what you
For me, that's
do.
a sign that you're working on a base of principle and not manipulation, right? And the principles are those things that are true no matter what, no matter where, whether it's family, whether it's work. And that's one thing I have found over decades of a career is how many times people have said, I really appreciate what we're doing to help me as a leader in this business, but I got to tell you, my relationship with my wife is better. My relationship with my 16-year-old son, who I'd been fighting with for 2 years, is better. Had one company that was a family business that when I started working with them, the son who was supposed to be the next CEO had been literally fired by the father out of the business. And the father hadn't seen the father in the business, the grandfather in this case, hadn't seen his grandchildren in probably well over a year. The family was very broken. And when I met with them, I said, well, what are your biggest priorities? They said, I'd give up the business if I could heal my family. I said, well, the good news is you don't have to. And after having worked with them for a while, um, and it took time, but after having worked with them, but only a couple of years, the son was back in the business. He was now the new CEO, and the as we were discussing their progress, he said, "You not only helped us save this company, you saved our family." Well, I don't know that I saved their family, but understanding those principles absolutely did save their family. Knowing how to solve problems, knowing how to have a sense of shared mission, working for the mission rather than being driven by ego. There are a number of things that come up. When you understand the core principles, you know what doesn't fit. And then you can help lead the way back to what those principles are. There aren't that many, they're not that complicated. So this kind of work it's not complicated, but it's very, very hard because it's hard emotionally. It challenges people's egos and it challenges, I was taught to manage people and I don't know how to lead them. Right? And maybe I'm a really good manager. Out of that. I worked with you know what? This is an interesting distinction. I did not work with this one person who wanted me to help him as a leadership coach. He was a very talented and very successful, very, very financially successful turnaround consultant. So his job was to go into a company that was failing, turn it around, and increase the valuation so so that it could be sold, right?
Mhm.
And when he met with me, he said, I'm very dissatisfied with my work. I said, seems like you're really successful at it. He said, I'm successful at my work. He said, but when I look back within a year, either the company that I helped to recover is purchased by someone else and being run very differently, or they're out of business. They never survive intact, ever. I've never had
Mhm.
a company survive intact. He said, and I want to be a better leader. I know I'm good at this job, but I want to be a better leader. And I explained to him, I can help you with that, but it will be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. And he was very offended by me saying that because he had done hard things. I know how to do hard things. I've done hard things my whole life. So I understand that this will be harder. And what he didn't, and I tried to explain, and what he didn't understand is the reason is nothing fails like success. He was all of the things that he had done had been reinforced financially and with short-term gratification.
Mhm.
So he was able to accomplish those short-term goals. He was so good at it that he would sometimes quadruple or more the valuation of the company. But none of it, and it might have looked sustainable, none of it was ever regenerative. And probably none of it was even that lower level of sustainable, he probably didn't hit. It was
Yeah.
kind of that quick turnaround, but that was very reinforced, so it almost creates an addiction-like mindset. And so overcoming that, he had to be ready for a tough, he had to be ready for his ego to be challenged. He had to
Yeah.
be ready to measure. He needed a paradigm shift. He needed to be able to measure success differently. And he just wasn't ready to do that. So he chose not to work with me, which was absolutely okay.
So you told us a lot that what sacrifice is giving up what you want now for what you want most.
Yes.
And that's what it takes to have a regenerative culture.
Yeah.
Is you have to be willing to sacrifice and you have to have a long-term idea and you have to be willing to change yourself
Yeah.
because
And
it doesn't
another
start
good definition of sacrifice is giving up something good for something better.
getting better.
And that's probably my favorite definition of sacrifice. I heard it from someone in a conversation. I wish I owned that description, but someone said it to me, and who knows who it was. But I love that definition. If I'm willing to otherwise it's just a loss. If you're giving up
Yeah.
something good and not getting something better, you just lost. But if you're giving up something good for something better, then that's a sacrifice.